Hello, this is Kate Jones, here with Maria Tureaud, the author of the newly released Gothic novel, This House Will Feed. It's set during Ireland's famine, now remembered as the Great Hunger, and also by its Irish name, On Gorta Mór. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I am delighted to be here.
It's lovely to see you. I have to tell you that I had not read a Gothic novel since probably my teens
Oh,
when
wow.
I came across a library copy of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I liked the book a
hmm
lot. But
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, I became a real chicken about anything having to do with horror movies, books, whatever. Which brings me to my first encounter with your book.
Oh, wow.
Yes, the back cover gave me pause. On the back cover, in big letters, it reads, "The taste of my brother's flesh still haunts me. Dot, dot, dot." That was enough to make me wonder whether I even wanted to start the book, much
hmm
less get all the way through it. And I have to tell you, I am so glad I did. From the very first chapter, I was hooked on the story. And there were times that I had to take a pause, and I
hmm
did not read it at night
Yep.
because I'm still a bit of a chicken. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And you are a great storyteller.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And one of the many things I love about This House Will Feed, yes, there's abundant cruelty and selfishness and cowardness in it.
hmm
And this is what's important, there's also a life saving amount of kindness, self sacrifice,
Yes.
and courage.
hmm Yes.
Plus, there's a great payoff for the reader. So, anyway, I really liked your author's note too. In it, you said you didn't want to write about the Great Hunger, but
Yeah.
felt compelled to do it. Why is that?
Very simply put, we don't learn about it in school. We don't talk about it as a people, as a culture. And there are many scars on the land to remind us that it did happen. But as a child, whenever you ask, you're curious about these things like, why does the field look like that? There are ridges, particularly where I'm from on the West Coast, which was absolutely ravaged by the Great Hunger. There are random ridges in fields on the sides of hills. And I remember asking my grandfather, what are those? Because it made no sense to me, right? And now I'm saying that, like most of these fields and hills I'm talking about, they're mostly for grazing these days. They're not exactly for crops. And I remember I was about 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old when I asked my grandfather, who was an avid farmer. That was his entire livelihood, and a very, very tall man. And I'm a very tall woman, but at the time I wasn't so tall. And he brought himself down to my level and he said, "You know the way your knees are full of scars because you fell?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, those tell the story of your life." And he said, "Those ridges tell the story of our country." But that's all he ever said about it. A couple of other telltales, I suppose, would have been I wouldn't say we're a morbid people, but we definitely. We're a little darker. Even though we're viewed as very Catholic, I've noticed that from moving to the States in particular, there seems to be a lot of our folklore is mixed into our Catholicism. So for us, it's very important on a Sunday after you go to Mass that you go visit everyone who's gone. So we go from cemetery to cemetery to cemetery. We bring flowers, we do our bits at the graves and tell everyone how our week was doing. So it wasn't unusual to find me in a graveyard on a Sunday afternoon. And in every single graveyard, every cemetery in the country, there are unmarked, what I can only describe as pits. I mean, they're obviously filled in, but they look like, I don't know, they're 10 feet by 10 feet, a little depressed down a little bit, nothing on top of them, nothing to mark them. And I don't remember how old I was when I first became aware of what they were. because they're so prevalent and so obvious. It must have come up in conversation from a very young age, but that's where they threw the bodies. That's where they dumped the bodies. Those are the famine pits. So from a very young age, I was aware of something absolutely atrocious that had happened, but we'd never really learned about it in school. So from that perspective, I didn't want to write about it because um, there was a huge weight on my chest and on my shoulders that I would have to do it right. I would have to make sure that it was extremely respectful. To say that an entire country dissociates an event, it puts a lot of pressure on you. However, I did also feel compelled to write about it because I didn't truly learn about it until I was an exchange student in my junior year of university. And I wound up in a very small college in Kentucky. And I took what I thought would be an easy A of a class, Irish history. And the professor there had an entire module on the Great Hunger. And that's where I learned the truth of it, that it wasn't a famine. It's the reason we call it the Great Hunger, not the famine, because there was plenty of food in the country and it was withheld from us. So I learned really the ins and outs of what it really was during my time there. And later on, when I eventually moved to the United States and I met a lot of people who would identify with Irish heritage, I realized that most people have no idea about the culture they identify with, the people they identify with, and the history they identify with. So from that perspective, I thought it might be a nice idea for anyone who wanted to learn a little bit, anyone who was genuinely interested. Doesn't have to be people of Irish heritage, but I thought if I can present this history in an accessible way that'll make it slightly entertaining as opposed to reading a dry textbook, that would be really, really nice for people to be able to connect with where they come from, because I would imagine the majority of people who identify with Irish heritage in this country, the vast majority of their ancestors would have come over during this time period, 1845 to 1852, because that's when the mass displacement started to happen. So I thought, well, little bit of education for people who want it, little bit of entertainment. But it was difficult to wrap my head around the thought of trying to make it entertaining. It's very much a double-edged sword, but Gothic seemed to be the best medium for that. Not only does where I come from lend itself to that atmosphere, I'm from County Clare, the Burn, the Cliffs of Moher, all of that very dreary, bleak but beautiful landscape, but it also seemed the right medium in order to be able to tell this story because Gothic horror is definitely based in reality. There's always an element of grounding to a Gothic, and the atrocities of man kind of went hand in hand with that way of storytelling. So that's why.
It's an incredible story, starting with your grandfather. I love what he said about the
Hmm.
scars and
Yeah.
that we carry them with
Yep.
us. So, your book has rich characters.
Yes.
Two questions. How did they develop as you wrote? And did
Mm.
you find them guiding you along the way?
Well, first we'll start off with, of course, because you start with your main character. So Maggie O'Shaughnessy. When you first sit down to write a book, you obviously think a lot about, well, I think more about my characters than I do about the plot. I'm very much a character driven person, whether I'm reading a book or I'm watching a television show or a film. I'm always looking at the characters themselves, and I always try to put myself in their shoes. So we've heard of method acting. I try to be a method writer where I completely immerse myself. I had to become Maggie in order to write her. Because I can't write characters unless I do that.
That's interesting. Does that confuse your family?
It can a lot of times, and in particular, the writing of this book sent me to a very dark place that I'm still digging myself out of. But the payoff in the end of it, for me, always is worth it. And I went deeper into Maggie than I've probably ever gone into another character, only from the standpoint of, you have to put on her mantle and say, okay, these are the circumstances that I find myself in here now for the first chapter. What am I feeling? How am I doing if I am in her shoes? So it took a little while to get into that character and to kind of really understand it. And so from what started as trying to portray this atrocity through entertainment kind of became grief. It became Maggie is probably completely grief stricken, but it's not just grief. I then had to put myself completely into her shoes and how I would be in that moment, how we Irish people as a culture, as a people, would have probably dealt with it during that time. And I found myself becoming cold. Like the first chapter with Maggie, she's completely dissociated. She's completely separate. Instead of grief, she's almost feeling guilt. It's survival guilt that she's feeling. And the only way for her to keep going, to stay the Reaper another day, is to completely bury that down and to try and push forward. As the story developed, as her character developed, I was then confronting a lot of generational trauma because I had to put myself in her shoes as an Irish person, as somebody who grew up in Ireland, and only moved to the States as an adult. There are a lot of things and situations from when I was younger that I never really dealt with. Like, we're not allowed to grieve. You're given 3 days, 3-day big funeral, right? And we're just supposed to get on with it after that. And there've been times in my life where I wasn't allowed to grieve for things. So I found myself working through that through Maggie and kind of swallowing it down and having to get on with things and to push through, and then giving her the opportunity to kind of work her way through that, through the plot, through what happens when she finally gets to the burn, to Lady Catherine's manor. And there are parts of her where that rage she feels, the anger that she feels, it was very much, it came from myself. I felt the same way, that I wasn't allowed to remember, I wasn't allowed to grieve. And that's kind of part of Maggie's entire character, is that she has pushed down the memories so far that she has blocked them out completely and has dissociated herself. She knows something terrible had happened, she knows the gist of it, but there are things that she can't remember because they're too traumatic for her to remember, if that makes sense.
Absolutely
um
makes sense. And
yeah,
Lady Catherine really did her a favor
yeah,
because of the spooky circumstances. Um,
absolutely.
and she had no choice. She
Yes,
had to get through it.
she did.
And it's just amazing how it all comes out and layer after layer gets peeled.
Yes, absolutely. And Lady Catherine herself, she is Maggie's mirror image. She is what Maggie had wished Maggie had become. They
Mhm.
lived a very similar life up to a point and then branched off. One was successful, one was not. And one is now in a position of power and one is not. So, from that point of view, especially with Irish storytelling, one single character is never a good character or a bad character. We're all what we need to be in the moment, in the situation that we're in, which I find that it's very human in that sense. So there's no real protagonist, no real antagonist. The only reason Maggie is our protagonist is because we are on this journey with her through her point of view. But if we had begun the story through Lady Catherine's point of view, the tables would have turned.
Lady Catherine's fascinating character.
She is very enigmatic.
Yes, indeed. So, how, without giving anything away, because I know you wouldn't,
Yes.
but how do you describe your story in a
Um,
nutshell, kind of thing?
in a nutshell, it is the true horror is the horror of men, and sometimes the only way to deal with the horrors of men is through development of female rage.
Ah, interesting.
I think that's the heart, the very, very core of it in a nutshell. That could apply to any book. It could be any genre, but that is the absolute core of, I think, this story.
And it's the horror of mankind, the real
Men,
horror,
yes,
mankind. So
absolutely.
it can be women or men,
Oh, absolutely.
but it's through the feminine
The feminine
rage,
rage,
which
yes,
a man can have also.
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's fascinating.
Yeah. I find it's when you think about masculine rage, I think it's the difference between revenge and vengeance. Revenge can be pleasurable. It's something you seek in the moment. It's reactionary, right? So I find masculine rage to be that reactionary revenge, right? So if you're thinking about revenge, I think of it as a very masculine type of feeling. Whereas when we think about female rage, I don't know, there's something a little more, it's not as reactionary, it's planned, it's careful, it simmers, and it's vengeance as opposed to revenge. It's not reactionary, it is planned, it's methodical, and it is something that is going to have a long lasting end result.
Yes. it builds up
Yes.
and it's
W-
taking care of business. That's what I wanted to
Taking care
say.
of business.
Yes,
Yes.
that jumped into my head when you were talking. I was like, yes, Maggie is taking care of business. It's her business
Yes.
to do. It's what
Yep.
she has to do. And
Exactly.
and that was true for Lady Catherine also.
Yes, it was.
She had something to do.
And she did
And
exactly what she needed to do. Yep.
oh, that's marvelous. That
Yep.
is just a great way to boil it down.
And it's not derogatory towards masculine or feminine. I have been guilty of masculine rage as well, that reactionary, knee jerk reaction almost. But that's what made men the great protectors that they were in primitive times because they were able to take care of it in the moment. The feminine aspect of it is slow, methodical. It's not just you I'll hurt, it's every generation that comes after you.
Yes. And we both have it. We have
Yes, we
we
have
have
both.
female male
Yep,
aspects within us. And that's
exactly.
what the whole thing against I can go on a tirade about that.
I know,
But
right?
pushing down women, is
Yes,
so counterproductive because,
absolutely.
whoever's doing it is also pushing down themselves because we're dual beings
Exactly, exactly. And
expressing
nobody,
ourselves one way or
ex-
the other.
and we're all very complicated.
Yes.
Human.
Yes. I know. I know. Oh my goodness. What did you learn from writing This House Will Feed?
It's a historical Gothic, so there was obviously research involved. I knew quite a bit going into it, but getting into the nitty-gritty was difficult. As a writer, I learned that I had the ability to tackle the tough concepts, the tough subject matters. I had the ability to I guess dance on the edge of that knife of entertainment versus education versus respect for the subject matter. So I learned a lot. I certainly did learn a lot. Yeah.
Grown a
Go on.
lot too.
Of course. Yeah, because of that catharsis and being able to work through my own generational trauma of grief, a generational trauma of a collective dissociation that we have as a society of like Irish people in general. Also, because I was able to channel myself into Maggie and kind of become Maggie, we kind of became one being. I was able to work through some things in particular that had been sitting heavy on my own chest for many, many years that I did not have the tools to be able to work through. So I was able to grow as a writer, as a person, as somebody with an interest in history, as somebody that loves storytelling. I was able to grow on all levels, which was fantastic.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
What led you to become a writer?
I'm not sure. When I think about it now, first of all, I feel I was very lucky to be born when I was born. It was an age before cell phones. It was an age before video games were around, but we certainly didn't have them. Even television-wise, it's interesting. I am what many would consider an elder millennial. I was born in 1984. But when I moved to the United States, I definitely could identify more with Gen X, I guess, because we were behind technologically to the point of where I understood the latchkey kid. I understand, because that's what we were. And for example, we only had two television channels until the very late 90s. So I didn't grow up with cable or any of that. We had to make our own entertainment.
Deprived childhood.
Well,
No, I'm
I
joking.
know, right? I know. I keep telling my son, I'm like, I had none of this. So I'm very lucky because I am neurodivergent. So I'm sure if I had had video games, that's what I would have been doing. But because I didn't, the only thing I could hyper focus on were books at that point, right? Because we only had one television and two choices for channels. So it was either sport or news for the most part, which I wasn't interested in. So it was books for me. Definitely books for me. We didn't exactly have a very good children's selection of books either. Our children's books were very much the classics. I was reading Louisa May Alcott and, Alice in Wonderland and all of those classics, Huck Finn. There came a point when I had read everything there almost was to read in the library and the selection we had in bookstores. So I moved on to adult literature very quickly. And one of the safest, quote unquote, genres for, a 9-year-old that's into the adult section is historical. So I was reading a lot of that. I did read my first Stephen King at the age of 10. Between historical and horror, I think the two of those, they melded for me at a very, very young and impressionable age. And I started dabbling when I was around 15 with actually writing my own. So that's kind of when it started for me. But I didn't really begin to take it very seriously until I moved to the United States. There's something about being completely removed from everything and everybody you know and love. There's a great loneliness, especially when you move to a foreign country. Now, I thought it would be different because I'd spent some time for university here, but I moved to a different part of the country. I'm in New Jersey. My university days were Kentucky and Ohio. I knew nobody here. It's very difficult to make friends as an adult as opposed to a student. So I found the only thing I had to occupy my time was to get back into my fictional worlds and write. And it took me a very long time to kind of get settled as a writer. I was querying for 14 years. I have thousands of rejections under my belt. And I just kept going. I kept going until I finally landed my agent in 2020 and we went from there.
Wonderful. When did your middle grade paranormal novel come
Mm.
out? And that's The Last Hope in Hopetown.
So The Last Hope in Hometown was released in October of 2022. We were right in the middle of the lockdown situations and all of the uncertainty in the publishing world. And it is the story of a human child who's been adopted by vampire parents. They live in a world where vampires are living alongside humans, but of course, it's very much Stranger Things meets vampires in the sense that there's a government conspiracy at the heart of everything, and our protagonist, Sophie, needs to basically save her parents from the hands of the government. So that was my debut, not only my first children's book, but my first published book. It was a wonderful experience to be able to get out there.
That's great.
Mm.
So, are you working on anything right now?
I am firmly in the adult world as of right now. My next book with Kensington releases this time next year. It's called Beneath It Sleeps. Once again, Irish Gothic historical. I'm firmly in that place right now. And that one is set for release January of 2027.
Well, I'll be reading that one also.
Fantastic.
You mentioned you'd like to move back to Ireland someday.
Yes.
So, why?
I didn't want to move to the United States. It's not something I'd ever planned to do. It's not that I didn't want to. I didn't come here kicking and screaming. But I grew up in an Ireland that was very different from any other generation's experience before me. I grew up in a time of the Celtic Tiger where we were on the forefront of the world's economic stage. There was no reason for me to leave the country. You know, there's the saying that Ireland's greatest export is its children. And that had been true for hundreds of years,
Mhm.
that we raised children to send them abroad. And, you know, one of the things that even the Irish government did in the early 90s was we made third level education free. So what we were in essence doing, we were trying to make our greatest export, our children, be even more sought after um, internationally. So we have one of the most widely educated populations in the world. So we're educating our children and we're sending them off into the world because there was never anything for them at home. But when I was going through, there was no reason to leave the country. So I didn't want to leave. I happened to meet a boy from New Jersey in university in Limerick, Ireland. And I had just been on my year abroad and I came back and I had actually gone to the States by myself. And when I got back, the university was like, "Oh, we have a solo traveler from the United States who's coming over to study for a year. Would you mind taking them under your wing because you were there alone last year, you know?" And I said, "Sure." And it was my husband, and the rest is history. So that's how I wound up in the United States. But when we made the decision to move to New Jersey, it was so that he could finish his degree in the United States. We had no intention of settling here on a full-time basis because he loves it there. He wanted to settle in Ireland. But between us moving here and him graduating, the global crash happened in 2008. So we wound up deciding to stay in the United States because the economic stability that I had grown up with in Ireland collapsed overnight. So once again, history repeats itself. So we wound up here and we were here for many years and we started to build a family. And of course, the two of us always think about could we move back? It's like we've been biding our time waiting for things to repair itself. And, you know, very slowly but surely it has been. And maybe one day we'll wind up back home. Be
Oh,
nice.
yes. And
This
how
is
old
my
is
home.
your son?
He is 12 years old now. I feel like he's over the age threshold now of where we could possibly just pick everything up and move back. I feel he'd be behind in school if we were to move there. And obviously, this is his life, this is his home. So I wouldn't want to uproot him. So I think if we were ever going to consider that, it would probably be maybe retirement age at this point.
Sounds like it will happen sometimes, especially since you both want it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll see what happens in the future.
It's a great country. I love to visit. And I've encouraged my son, who's 34, look into Ireland, but be careful, don't drive. Even walking in Dublin, you're so used to looking to the left or the right or whatever, you to look
Hmm.
the opposite. So I just follow exactly the walk signs
Yeah.
to get
No, it's
across the street.
it's so funny and it's so interesting because I have been driving for much longer in the United States than I ever did in Ireland. When I'm driving through back roads like in Pennsylvania, they remind me of the Irish main roads. But I drive very slowly in Pennsylvania on those back roads because I'm not used to driving that kind of road on the wrong side. But when I go home, it's like, I don't know, the NASCAR driver in me comes out. I'm like, gearing, and my husband's hanging onto the bar. And, I've no problem. And the roads at home are very much, even the rural roads in Pennsylvania, like the Irish roads are much smaller. And I'm like, I'm able to maneuver no problem. I guess my depth perception, things are different because I was taught how to drive on those roads. So I know exactly within a hair's breadth of where I need to go.
Thank goodness someone does.
I know, right? I know. So yeah, it's probably me speeding around that random curve in Ireland and going, tourists, shaking my fist.
That's funny. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
I do always like to discuss a little bit about the writing journey in general. And for anybody who's listening out there who is writing books or is in the query trenches or is trying to publish, whatever your path to publication may be, I just want to end with there's no easy way to get published. I spent many years trying to be traditionally published only because I don't have the wherewithal, the smarts, or the ingenuity to be self or indie published. I have great respect for those authors, but it is a lot of work that I personally could never wrap my head around. So there are very many paths to publication, and I don't want people out there to be trying to put all their eggs into a traditional pathway. Some genres do better in other forums, in other methods. So yeah, don't put all your eggs in your basket, I guess, or eggs in one basket. Really research your market and go with the path that allows you to continue to hold on to that spark, that love that you started with, because we do lose that along the way. It is a very difficult industry, very difficult business. And I don't like to talk about perseverance because perseverance can be toxic to a lot of people. It becomes toxic positivity. Like, you can do it, just keep going. It's not constructive for many people. What I would say instead is do exactly what you need to do to preserve the spark that got you into it to begin with.
Ah,
You
that's
know,
good. That's a great distinction.
yeah, whatever that needs to be. If that means giving up on, submitting to publishers through an agent, then that's what it is. Just be prepared. Make sure that you understand your market. Like, if you're writing something that would do very well in the indie or self-publishing space, go for it. Don't be hanging around waiting for trad if you don't need to.
Good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Maria, thank you so much for your
Thank you, Kate.
stories, your
Of course.
insights. It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for liking this household feed. Thanks for being interested, not only interested, but being entertained. I guess I did what I had set out to do. So thank you so much, Kate. Appreciate
And,
it.
and congratulations for
Thank you.
producing a really good work.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it.
This is Kate Jones with Everyday Creation. Thank you for joining us today.